Dark water in the English Channel. Ahead, a thin line of France. Inside the landing craft, it's cramped. Wet jackets cling to skin. Some hands shake, from cold or from the quiet knowledge that not everyone will return. They were Canadians. Many of them were young. They had trained for one thing: land, push forward, do the job, and come back. But at Dieppe, on August 19th, 1942, everything goes wrong. As the first light cuts through the mist, German machine guns are already waiting, and the shingle beach is not a place where plans survive. And yet, even on this day, the bloodiest day of the war for Canada, they will hold together in the way people do when they refuse to abandon one another, not because someone promised an easy victory, but because their own are beside them. This is the story of Dieppe, a story of a mistake that cost thousands of lives and futures, and a story of Canadian courage, steady enough to endure the impossible. It's 1942. The Allies need a win, urgently. Europe is under Nazi control. The Soviet Union is bleeding on the Eastern Front and demanding a second front. Britain is holding on, but it must show it can strike back. Canada is already at war. Its divisions in Britain have trained for months, and they wait. For many soldiers, the war still feels distant, just beyond the horizon. And waiting is its own punishment. You're ready to risk everything, but you're given no moment to act. Then comes the idea of a raid, not a full invasion. A fast hit, land quickly, damage key targets, gather intelligence, and withdraw. The target is the French port of Dieppe. It looks within reach, close enough, within fighter range, and seemingly vulnerable for a few hours. But plans like this carry a trap. It sounds like confidence. It feels like speed will save you. If we're quick, we'll be gone before they react. And into that trap, men are sent, mostly Canadians. Here's the honest truth. Dieppe was not a Canadian operation. It was an Allied one. But Canadians paid the price more than anyone else. That's why, in Canada, Dieppe became more than a battle. It became a wound that never closes unless you look at it directly. On paper, the plan is neat, even elegant. Landings are spread across several beaches along roughly 16 kilometers of coastline. Two flank forces must silence German batteries. West flank, neutralize guns. East flank, do the same. Then the main assault goes straight into Dieppe itself, the town and the port. Units receive their tasks: suppress strong points, push into town, disable infrastructure, hold long enough to complete objectives, then withdraw back to the ships. It's a plan measured in hours. But on a defended shore, every minute is its own war. And one more reality: amphibious assaults depend on engineering and firepower. You need engineers to cut lanes through obstacles. You need heavy support. You need precision and surprise. Dieppe is a port. A port means walls, concrete, stones, waves, barriers. A port is easier to defend than to attack. It's almost physics. But Canadians don't argue with physics. They do what soldiers do: prepare and go. Because armies run on execution, and because somewhere above them, there is always the hope that this time it will work. Night, August 19th. Ships and landing craft leave England. Mines, fog, radio silence. Everything from the textbook. But war rarely follows the textbook. On the approach, part of the force collides with a German convoy. A brief firefight. And the crucial loss: the enemy is alerted. Surprise, the most valuable currency of a raid, is suddenly scarce. This is where a Canadian trait shows up in the most real way. Not movie heroism, but discipline. When the plan cracks, the human nervous system wants to run. They don't. They keep moving. Because they were trained not to rely on luck. They were trained to take a step when afraid, and then take the next step too. On the eastern flank, disaster begins almost immediately. Some landings are late, some hit a shoreline already fully awake. One of the most tragic episodes unfolds at Puis, a narrow beach, high cliffs, concrete positions. Men are trapped, sea behind them, walls ahead, fire above. And you see something statistics can't explain. Men stand up again and again. They move toward the wall. They try to break through. They try to pull the wounded back. They try to do the impossible, because they don't know how to abandon each other. This isn't attacking for the sake of attacking. It's fighting to survive together, to keep order where order should not exist. This is where the legend of Dieppe is born. Not a legend of victory, but a legend of endurance. When everything is against you, and you still remain soldiers. The main landing hits Dieppe head-on. Red and white beaches, a strip of shingle, a seawall, obstacles, strong points. German fire rakes the shore from both sides, and the town becomes a fortress. Canadian infantry leave the craft and step into a corridor of fire. Water up to knees, then waists. Weapons heavy. Men fall. Others rise and drag them clear. This is the moment where it's easy to slip into cheap heroics. But the truth is harder and stronger, because courage is not a speech. Courage is doing the job when you know the odds are small. Tanks come ashore, the Calgary Regiment. They were meant to give momentum, crush lanes open, help the infantry. But shingle, obstacles, and the seawall break the mechanics. Some tanks bog down, others cannot get beyond the beach. Instead of a breakthrough, you get steel pinned under fire like a target. And still, crews keep firing, shielding the infantry, buying seconds. Their mission isn't to save the tank. Their mission is to help the men exposed on open ground. Small groups do manage to enter the town. Sometimes dozens, sometimes fewer. They move along streets and walls, where every doorway is danger. They keep advancing as they were trained. Short rushes, covering each other. If you want Canadian heroism, it's here. Not in a clean victory, but in the refusal to collapse into chaos. They remain units. They remain comrades. Even when the line is nothing more than a shingle beach. West of Dieppe at Pourville, the fight looks different. There, Canadians do push toward their objectives. They meet resistance, confusion, heavy fire. But where terrain allows, they do the job. This is where a name becomes a symbol. Charles Merritt, a commander who keeps men together when everything wants to fall apart. Not by speeches, but by action. He leads, organizes, returns into fire again and again. And there is another kind of courage. Quiet, almost invisible. Chaplain John Weirfoot. He isn't required to assault like an infantryman, but he goes to the wounded, again and again. For hours, he helps evacuate casualties, steadies men on the edge of breaking. And in the end, he does something hard to fit into military logic. When he has a chance to leave, he stays. To remain with those who will become prisoners. Because for him, his own do not end at the waterline. That is Canadian strength worth showing. Not only how they fight, but how they carry responsibility inside the fight. After a few hours, the truth is unavoidable. The raid is failing. A heavy word. Failing. Because thousands are still on the beach. And for them, failure is not politics. It is survival. Withdrawal is ordered. And withdrawing under fire can be harder than attacking. Attack gives you the illusion of control. You move forward. Withdrawal is a fight for every man you can drag into a boat. Landing craft approach and take hits. The sea takes men as indifferently as bullets do. But Canadians keep pulling the wounded. Keep covering each other. Keep doing the impossible. Because the alternative is something they will not accept. And again, no cheap speeches. A hero is not someone who feels no fear. A hero is someone who feels fear and stays. After Dieppe, numbers sound like a cold report. But behind each number is a name. Of the 4,963 Canadians who embarked, roughly 2,210 returned. Casualties were about 3,367, killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. Canada's official figures include 916 dead and around 1,950 prisoners. These are not big numbers. They are whole battalions erased in a single day. And then, captivity. For many, Dieppe didn't end in August 1942. It continued behind barbed wire until the war ended. Yet even there, Canadians held on to something vital: dignity. Memoirs of prisoners are full of pain, but often carry a stubborn line: we held. This is why Dieppe matters for the future, because it reminds us victories are not made by slogans. Victories are made by people, and by decisions that must protect them. People argue about the lessons of Dieppe. Some say this disaster forced the Allies to rethink landings, that after Dieppe it became clear: you cannot seize a heavily defended port head-on. You need engineering solutions, heavier support, a different logic of assault. Others say those lessons could have been learned without paying this price. Both perspectives deserve to be heard. Because debate is part of memory. It's an attempt to make the next decision smarter than the last. But one thing is not debatable. At Dieppe, Canadians showed who they were. Not perfect movie soldiers, but men who, placed in a kind of hell, did not dissolve into panic. They held formation. They carried the wounded. They went back into fire. They stayed with comrades even when they could have left. If you need a conclusion, it's simple. Not pretty, but true. Courage doesn't guarantee victory, but without courage, there is no victory at all. And when we say Dieppe, we are not celebrating a catastrophe. We are honouring people who did everything they could in an operation where everything they could was still not enough. They were Canadians, and this was their hardest test.